So I want to tell you a bit about that tonight. When I was a little girl in Iowa, I had 3 brothers, still do. But on Sundays, my dad, who worked hard during the week, would sit me in his lap, wrap his arms around me, and read me the comic strips from the Sunday paper. The Sunday was special because the comics were in color rather than black and white. We call them the funnies. I don't know if that's a term used in this part of the world or not, but we got to do the funnies. And my brothers didn't seem interested. It was just Dad and me. And I would sit in his lap and feel the warmth of his body and his arms wrapped around me, and he would read me funny stories from the paper. It was a wonderful experience with my dad. I loved him dearly, and he loved me. And that was our time together on Sunday mornings, reading the funnies before we went to church. And I knew I belonged. He gave me that message so dearly and beautifully. And then his mom and dad, my grandparents, were farmers in Iowa. They had a dairy farm about a couple hours away from where we lived in the city. And they also grew corn, as one would do in Iowa, and they raised hogs, which is also what one does in Iowa. And we would go visit them maybe 3 or 4 times a year. And I was the oldest granddaughter of this couple. And so when we would come, I have this wonderful memory of driving up the cinder driveway up to their yard. And my grandma was a short little lady, come running out of the house with her arms out. And she didn't have to bend down to hug me because she was short anyway. And I would run into her arms, and she would wrap her arms around me, just absolutely filled with delight. I don't remember her saying anything in particular, but she just was so delighted that I was there. And I would get to sleep with her. She and my grandfather had separate bedrooms, which is what I thought all grandparents did. I thought that for quite a few years, actually. But Grandma had her own room with a big double bed and bay windows and rose wallpaper and all sorts of things, and I would get to sleep with her. It was very special to have visits with Grandma. And then later on in high school, things were not good at home in those days particularly, and I was needing some love and attention from elsewhere. And along came a woman named Jean, who was the mother of my best friend in high school. And Jean, for whatever reason, I don't know, but she just took a shine to me and would welcome me. And through high school, Jill and I, her daughter, and I would do many things together. But when I got to university, and Jill went to another university, I would come home and couldn't wait to get up to Jean's house to see her and talk with her. She was a woman of great faith, and she somehow knew that I just needed a listening ear and a lot of support and a lot of love. And she gave that. And I would sit, she'd make a big bowl of popcorn, and we would sit, and I would talk and talk and talk and talk and talk. And she would listen. And when she was done listening at the end of the evening, she would reach out her arms like this. Of course, she always sat in a rocking chair, and I was across from her. And she would reach out and take my hands and say, "Let's pray." And she would pray a beautiful prayer for me. And in those days, I wasn't particularly interested in faith. But she just persisted. And she would always do that, reaching out her arms to me and holding my hands and praying to God that whatever it was I had just spilled about, I was doing all sorts of things in those university days, as many people do, that would not be the most life-giving. And I trusted her. I would just spill out all of what was going on, and she would listen and listen and listen, and would love me by her prayers. My 3 brothers went on, all of them, to be married and have children, and so they have blessed me with 2 nieces and 8 nephews, all of whom I love dearly. And it was so fun, as many of you know, with little kids. When they like you and trust you, they leap at you, whether it's off the side of a swimming pool or a retaining wall or the deck or something, but they just say, you know, they jump before they say, catch me, knowing that you will. And so I have wonderful memories of my 10 nieces and nephews, and being able to use my arms in that case to love them and to hold them and to receive their trust. It's a wonderful, wonderful gift that continues to this day. I moved to Regina 37 years ago and taught for many years at Canadian Bible College here in the city. And so every 7 years I would get a sabbatical leave to study, and about 20 years ago I took my studies at a Benedictine monastery in Minnesota called St. Benedict's. And they had a study program for people whom they called scholars. I'm not sure I ever quite lived up to that, but I worked hard at it. But I lived with them for 4 months. And the fun part of it was that in my emails back and forth setting this up, I was dealing with the woman, the nun, the sister who was the head of this program. And her name was Dolores Super, S-U-P-E-R. But the way they did emails at that place is that they would put the last name first. And so I kept getting all these emails from Super Dolores, which just cracked me up, that this monastery full of 400 nuns would have a Super Dolores, kind of like Super Mario or somebody. Anyway, it was so fun to meet her, and we became fast friends over the months that I was there, and I've now continued my commitment to the monastery by being a lay member of it. And so I go once or twice a year, pre-COVID, to spend time with them. Super Dolores just turned 90 last fall, and when I was there the last time before COVID hit, I was staying at the guest quarters and having breakfast, and I heard the door open at the far end of the hallway, and so I was the only one there, so I got up and went out to see who was there. And I looked all the way down this long hallway, and there was Super Dolores at the other end with her arms out again, with every expectation that I would run into her arms, as I ended up doing. It was so fun to see her. And for her to see me, it's a reciprocal thing, isn't it? It's hard to hug somebody who doesn't hug you back. You might try it once, but it's short-lived. So it's very much both of us participating. And Super Dolores is a dear friend to this day. We did a Zoom meeting when she turned 90 last fall, and it was wonderful to see her again in that way. But she loved me, she delighted in me. I don't know why. There were all these other people coming through the program, hundreds of them over the years. But she knew what I needed. I was quite lonely there when I first went. And she would just phone up, or she'd come over to my apartment, and I lived in a building with other sisters, and she would come over and just say, how about if we go to a movie tonight? And off we would go, just the two of us. Wonderful gift of love and friendship. But the thing is, as all of you know, I trust, is that arms are used not only to convey the nice parts of love, the delight and the wonder and the safety and the belonging and the trust and all of that, but sometimes love requires us to do difficult things. I know that I'm not the only one in this group who has held a beloved pet as they died. And I've done that with 2 of my dogs. Very difficult to do, and yet I wouldn't want to be anywhere else. But holding my Cooper was my last dog that I had to decide when his life was to be over. Those were my arms conveying love in a very difficult way. I have a dear friend now who has Parkinson's disease and has been in a care home in Calgary for the last 4 years now. And she's failing, and it's so very hard these days not to be able to go and be with her. And yet, we talk. I phone her every Tuesday morning at 11:30, Regina time, so that she's ready for the phone call. And this week, it took 7 tries of me phoning, and I think maybe it hit the mute button on her phone or something, but it was dead air, and you're trying to problem solve. It was very difficult, but we talk each week, sometimes more fruitfully than others. But at the end, I always say to her, I love you, Joan, and imagine a big hug, because we got well practiced at doing that when we lived together here in Regina for many years. We've traveled the world together, and she knows what a Margi hug is like. And so it's wonderful to be able to just say that on the phone. It's not as good, of course, as being there and doing it in person, but that's the gift. And it's difficult. It's painful. Every week I pray that I would have the grace I need to listen to the suffering of my friend, and it's considerable. It's not easy for me, but it's much more difficult for her. And I love her, and so I hang in there with her. And I have another friend here in Regina who's a massage therapist. And what she does with her arms and her hands. She brings healing to me and to many other people, to the aches and pains of your body, but more than that for her. She has a sense of what people need and where their spirits are. And she uses her arms and her hands as her gift to the world, and does that so ably. And isn't it wonderful? I hope that all of you have friends that you count on, that you love, who love you, and who forgive you. I don't know of any other relationship beyond friends and marriage partnerships where the need for forgiveness is so great. I think, some time ago I was at a friend's house and she said something that was hurtful to me, and I snapped back and I put on my coat and I stormed out of the house in a very immature rage. And off I went walking. It was wintertime, and so I'd walked about 6 blocks through the park and out to the country road, and was walking down the country road. And all of a sudden I looked over, and there, 100 yards away or so, was my friend who'd thrown on her coat and come after me. And we hurried to get to each other. By then I had my arms out, both of us saying to each other, I'm sorry, please forgive me. What a wonderful, wonderful gift that is, to know that you are forgiven and that you are able to forgive other people for saying things, just thoughtless things that you didn't mean to say, that were hurtful. I'm so grateful, so very grateful. And then there's Jesus. You thought maybe we were getting to that, I hope. Jesus on the cross had his arms out. Because he loves us. He loves me, he loves you. He loves every single creature that God has created. And he loved us so much that he died on the cross to be in solidarity with all the pain and suffering that we live with. Sometimes we perpetrate it, sometimes we're on the receiving end. It's a wonderful, wonderful gift that is bigger, and yet it's the love of Christ that's in all these people, from my father all the way through to now and into the future. The love of God that means you belong, you're special. I delight in you. I forgive you. I bring healing. I bring strength. I send hugs over the miles. That's what I think about in Lent. I don't get all guilty about things. I screw up regularly, as we all do. And I know that I'm forgiven, and I'm so grateful for that. So Lent is a beautiful time for me. It's not a dark time, and in some places it is, I know, and for some people it is. You're denying yourself, and I hope that I focus more in Lent on the love of Christ that we celebrate on Easter. The love of his disciples who stood with him at the cross. I think of Mary Magdalene, a good friend of his. How painful it must have been for her to stand and watch her dear friend die. But she didn't leave, she stayed. And I hope by God's grace that I have the courage and that all of us do to stay with love in those situations that are difficult, as well as delighting in all those people in our lives that we can delight in. People we don't even know can take pleasure in what they're able to do and the skills they bring to life. So it's a good thing. I asked Michael just before we started this if the Anglican hymnal that we use has Oh, the Deep, Deep Love of Jesus, and he said no. So thankfully I brought another hymnal, but I want to end with this. And I'm going to sing, not because I have a great voice, but it's beautiful. Oh, the deep, deep love of Jesus, vast, unmeasured, boundless, free, rolling as a mighty ocean in its fullness over me, underneath me, all around me is the current of thy love, leading onward, leading homeward to my glorious rest above. I wish you a blessed Lent. Thank you and good night.